GS Insurance, the business partner committee chair. And next up, I'm going to let Brianna introduce herself. She's going to be the speaker. So Brianna, you're up.
Perfect. Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to my home. Thank you for allowing me to lead this discussion on reintegration planning and the 4 subtopics that we're going to talk about, which are staffing, communication, safety, and policy adaptation. I'll kick this off with a little background on myself. My name is Brianna Walsh, and I work for Quilsis Energy Design, formerly Energy Squared. We're an MEP engineering firm headquartered in Princeton with offices in California, Texas, and Florida. And we're owned by a very large corporation out of Anaheim, California, where you can basically smell the churros being cooked from Disney World or Disneyland. My role is VP, and it's a mix of operations and business development. And what does that mean? That means that I'm not an engineer by trade. I only play one on TV. So if you have specific engineering questions regarding reintegration, I'm happy to help get you an answer, but that's not our discussion for today. So while I work out of our Princeton office with 100 engineers in our division, I serve on a committee with my fellow corporate leaders from other acquired companies throughout the US. And our goal is to plan for the successful reintegration back into the workforce. The group is made up of HR professionals, business owners, and representatives from a number of different states that are all in different stages of this pandemic. So I have the luxury to hear different business leaders and owners work through this process together. As you can guess, the conversation is more about how we will return, not when we will return, because there's so many variables on that. I mentioned before the state parks opening this weekend, so we are starting to see some light, and now is the time to be planning. So the focus is on how we will return. Each state has a completely different viewpoint on how they recommend re-entering the workforce, and following CDC guidelines as well as state and federal and jurisdictional mandates is absolutely the first consideration. But what's next? What's the second? How do you develop not just who, but how many people will go back? This is not a one-size-fits-all answer because there's so many different things to consider. For example, how capable is your team at completing their tasks effectively remotely? If the answer is we're doing great, your response may be not to move anyone back to the office. If you only have 5 people in your organizational total, you may be able to return 100% and still maintain social distancing. My company and my division has opted for what we're calling a 20-50-100 approach. So we are reintegrating 20% of our people to start. And like I said, that is pulled from information by the CDC, the federal government, the phasing plans set by the government, by the state governments, and just a number of different recommendations from the different states. I hear recommendations from Wisconsin to Florida to California, and New Jersey seems to be leading the charge, which is wonderful for a lot of us. So 20%. Well, how do you figure out who should be in that 20% and who should that consist of? One personal recommendation I'd like to suggest is doing a work from home evaluation of your employees and their capabilities. This is a really unprecedented situation where many of us have had to merge to a complete integration of a virtual world. And a lot of people didn't have that before. By a show of hands, how many people had a work from home policy in your company before this pandemic? Okay, that's good. A lot of people. How many, well, I won't ask who didn't, but how many people have made adaptations or changes to that policy since learning this 100% remote situation? Right. So it's a changing world. It's a changing situation. And as we learn, we're going to have to continue to adapt. That is why I've opted for a 20% integration and not a 50% integration. Because I think as we start to reintegrate back into the workforce and back into the offices, I would rather test with 20% of my staff to determine the efficiency versus 50%. And that's because, like many of you, I'm thinking of things like spending and business and doing a test with 50% of my employees at once doesn't seem like an efficient thing to do. So starting with 20%. Now I have 100 people, so it's easy to calculate my 20%. You might have to make your determination based on the number of people, okay? if you have thousands or if you have, you know, tens. So like I said, I completed a work from home evaluation of my employees. Who's doing it well? Who's not doing it well? Is this something, this is not something that you have to share with your leadership team or with your general team, but it is something that you should determine with your leadership team. We have decided to break people down into reds, yellows, and greens. Who did it exceptionally well? Those are my greens. Luckily, I work for an engineering firm with a lot of tech savvy individuals. So I'm fortunate to have a number of greens, but we all have those people who every day had a different computer issue, Excel wasn't working, you know, this or that was breaking, and their efficiency dramatically declined as part of their working from home. So those will be the first people I think about reintegrating back into the office. But logistically, does that work? Engineering, we have big desks. We have big desks and can hold engineering plans, but not everyone does. They are recommending maintaining 6 feet social distancing as we go back to the offices. Can your desks and your schedules accommodate that? Some people have recommended bringing some staff back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, other staff back Tuesday, Thursday. But like my office, like many of yours, is probably set up by teams or departments. So does that work well? Does that work well, bringing half a team back certain days? Another recommendation I heard was to bring certain people back, fully, and then others not at all. Well, what kind of discriminatory practices does that promote, right? To be honest, we're all still brainstorming here. You want to develop a reintegration plan that works efficiently for your team, and that also allows you to maintain social distancing, and that might mean alternating every cubicle. One point I want to make on that is that this is a really difficult time with unemployment claims directly through the roof. And one point I heard on an HR seminar recently was that with the increased unemployment, should we as employers expect an increase in lawsuits? Things like wrongful termination and discrimination. I like to think not, but the truth is we just don't know. I hear many business leaders making comments like, you know, we'll make the young people go back first because they're the healthiest, or let's send people back who don't have any kids. And I won't pretend to speak further on the topic because I'm not your HR professional, but you need to err on the side of caution for discrimination when making these decisions. Referring back to the ADP seminar I mentioned earlier, I thought I'd share a story about a company in Maryland, someone not from my company, by the way, that made a comment saying that he could guess who had diabetes, which is an immunocompromised class, based on the weight of his staff. Now, on this call, I'm surrounded with a number of intelligent individuals who I'm sure would not make comments like that, but that is absolutely a discriminatory practice and something that you need to err highly on the side of caution when making these determinations on who should go back. So what's my recommendation? After a lot of discussion with HR professionals and our in-house counsel, our president, who many of you know, Alan Samuels, and I had a town hall with all of our staff, and we asked them to send us a private note with their particular input on returning to the office, which provided us with an open forum for them to disclose any medical concerns as well as open up about their willingness to be back. And let me say, it's a mixed bag. A ton of people are saying, I'm terrified, I don't want to go back. And a ton of people are saying, please put me back in, coach. For my mental sanity, I need to get back into the office setup. So it provided us with an opportunity to get their input candidly, which helped us make our determinations for our 2050 plan. So does anyone have any specific considerations on staffing that you're thinking of that is impacting your decision on which staff can go back first?
How are you handling your COVID? Do you have any employees that were COVID positive and now are okay? How are you considering bringing them back into the workplace even though they're healthy? And what is the feedback from your staff on having them back into the environment?
So I will be honest, we have been fortunate that we have not had one individual with COVID, and that's because we integrated our staff to being 100% virtual very, very early on, the first of March. we sent everyone home. So I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that topic. The one thing that I'll make very clear is just make sure you are adhering to HIPAA practices when you're advising on the staff that have had COVID situations. Is that someone anyone has dealt with that they're willing to speak to? Perhaps you, Ryan?
Yes, we did have somebody that was positive pretty early on, but we found out once we were 100% virtual. Although there could have been a time where that person was in the office when they were positive. So what nobody's there now, and it's been now, I guess, a month and a half, maybe a little bit more. So we're really heavily looking into what that cleaning is going to look like. And I can see Julie's here too. So I've talked to them a little bit about it as well. Professional restoration. And, you know, the cleaning part is something we're all going to have to deal with, whether we had a positive case or not.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's a great question. And Deb, I'm sure people will be coming to you to come up with a communication plan on that.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that.
Do we have any other considerations regarding integration of staffing and how to make those determinations?
Also, guys, feel free to stick it in the chat function on the side too, if you do have some things that maybe you're doing. I know my company is talking about possibly doing east-facing folks and then west-facing folks. That's how we're going to possibly integrate. You know, no more use of our stand-up desks. That's another thing that we're not going to do. But you know, the ideas are going to fly out there, so feel free to share them. We all want to get back to work safely.
All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, we'll just jump right into the next section, which is on communication. And I'm hoping that sparks some more generation of communication between us. So communication is twofold. And I know we've had a number of different seminars on marketing. I sat in on Deb's last week, which was wonderful. But communication is incredibly important right now, as we all know. There is two types of communication though. And I, for one, have been focusing on communication with both staff and clients, but I see people who are staying silent. And let me reiterate, that is not the answer right now. You need to be communicating more than ever to your staff and your clients. So I highly recommend beginning with your internal communication plans so that you are on the same page when your clients call. Many of you had a work from home policy, which is wonderful. How many of you had clear-cut guidelines for your managers on how to manage remote employees? Okay, a little less. So think about the fact that we not only had to figure out how to manage individuals who were moving to a remote setup, something many of us had never dealt with. And now we're going to be trying to figure out how to manage a mixed bag with some people in the office and some people out of the office. And so communication to all employees is going to be more important than ever. So how are you planning on handling this hybrid working experience? How are you going to manage it? Setting the expectations of not only the employees, but the managers is going to be essential. The first step is to communicate a plan to your management team and then to all the staff. Many of us have been in the unfortunate situation where we've had to facilitate layoffs and furloughs. Will the furloughed employees be brought back? If not, how will their responsibilities be divided to the other members of the team? Speaking to your team and developing a transparent plan of expectations, especially as we feel like things are starting to get back to normal. The truth is, a lot has changed. A lot of people's job responsibilities has changed. A lot of the functions and the daily aspects to our jobs has changed. So especially with teams being limited and teams having partial layoffs and furloughs, who's picking up that bulk? Who is calling the clients? Is the CEO or the president or the business development manager going to be in charge of contacting all the clients and telling them that this is now your new point of contact? Or is it going to be the individual's responsibility? but defining that is really important at this time. Another aspect to communication is preparing your staff on how to answer some difficult questions that they're going to have. So if someone was furloughed or laid off, how is your team going to handle those questions from your clients? What would you like them to say? And this is something that many people have not dealt with before. So I highly encourage you to have those conversations, especially if project manager A is taking over from project manager B. Coach them on what to say when the client says, well, where did so-and-so go? Are they still with the company? Because it's difficult. It's difficult enough, and it's our responsibility as business leaders to give them guidance. So once you've developed some of the in-house communication plans, then it's time to get in contact with your clients. And I'm sure many of you have been using this downtime to market and touch base with clients. And a lot of us have been informing our clients of our operational changes in the way we function, or the services we've provided, or the services we're going to continue to provide. But how are you planning to communicate to your clients the changes in your staffing as we reintegrate back? Is this something anyone has thought of? Does anyone have any concerns about how to advise people on the fact that they have had to furlough and lay people off, why project managers have changed, why it's not the same painter or cleaner coming to your office or your business or your residence? Because the last thing you want is for your clients to see you as not a strong, healthy business.
Yeah, I don't think we thought about that. Jen, I'll get you in there just a second. I don't think that we thought about, as our company thought about a blanketed, let's put together what our communication looks like in each different sector. So that's something we're definitely going to work on after this call. Jen, you had something to say?
Sure. I was going to say, in regards to property management, I'm actually on the operations side with building management. So there are situations that I've come across currently that perhaps some of our vendors and partners have furloughed, positions that now, if we have some capital projects in place, may temporarily be on hold. So in a way, it's kind of like still relaying this message. And what I've said to my board members is like, at the moment, okay, we may not be having contractors coming in and out of the building for projects that, did not predate COVID, but at least let's get together and do the legwork to execute these projects once the governor's order is lifted. Like for right now, a happy medium that I've found is like I do have some exciting boiler projects coming up and design. So perhaps maybe let's get together on a Zoom with the contractor, or if we're bidding things, let's think about it that way. Again, just because we're all living through COVID, let's try our best to not let the world stop. Like I hate people say, well, not that I hate people, excuse me. I don't like when people are saying like, this is the new norm. No, it's not the new norm. It's temporary. This will pass. But what are things that we can do to be proactive? And, if it's a matter of getting on a Zoom with an engineer or a project manager, let's go for it. So that's an approach that I've been taking on regarding like the managerial operations part.
No, and I think that's great, and I appreciate you sharing that, Jen. And I hope you'll keep some great engineers in mind for those boiler projects. But do we have any board members on the group? I believe we do. Has anyone experienced positive or negative communication, and any advice you have for the business partners?
I see John Riley was here. He had his hand up. I don't know if you want to share something, John.
There we go. Sorry. Had to unmute myself, which
There you
is
go.
not an easy thing for me to do, both physically and mechanically. But and Gary knows that. Gary is on my board, Gary Rosenthal. Yeah, we've been communicating with our residents more so than necessarily we've obviously have ongoing communications with our contractors that are coming in. We're continuing, our clubhouse is closed, but we're continuing to clean it as an example. And we're communicating that to our residents. And we send out not only 2 to 3 times a week an e-blast about virtual activities we're trying to get going, but we're also from the board sending a separate e-blast, just informing them of where we stand and how we're trying to comply with Governor Murphy's requests as he issues additional executive orders. The challenge we have had one resident who tested positive, and we have had contractors who have tested positive. So the question I'll throw back at you guys is, what about contractors, and what's their responsibility to let us know that someone that they're sending to us contract or tested positive or suspects that they have it? We've been handling them on a one-by-one basis, and basically saying, and could be wrong, but saying, I'd rather not have that person. As a matter of fact, I don't want that person coming on my site. If they suspect, please take the appropriate measures. We're going a little bit further than that now and saying, back to the contractors, we expect you to have the policies in place, that you are working with your employees so that they don't have any fear about telling you that they've contracted it. There's no repercussions, but that you understand that we expect you not to send someone who suspects it. You don't have to tell us why, just you can tell us, look, Bill can't come on site today, or Bill is out for the next 2 weeks. We don't want them to violate HIPAA, but we're working real hard as best we can, as best anybody can, to minimize the impact of COVID on our community. We're an active adult community, so depending on where they stand today, we're either in the target group or not in the target group. Take your pick. But we've been fortunate so far, and we're working very, very hard to keep that together. So, but as far as community, we don't have any clients per se. So I use our clients are our residents. Of course, the other issue, which we won't get into on this, the other issue is some of our clients are saying, well, no clubhouse, no fees. I'm not paying. You're not giving me a clubhouse, I'm not paying. And ironically, almost all of those that have said it, to our knowledge, have never actually been in the clubhouse in 15 years. So go figure. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think that's great. And I think you just gave us a couple really good points on both proactive and reactive communication we should all be taking. Proactive in the perspective that your clients want to hear what you're doing. Your clients want to know that you are not going to send someone on site if you even suspect that something might be wrong, or that they might have contracted the virus. And reactive in the regard that if someone is test positive, it is your responsibility to inform those that they've been in contact with. That's just the facts.
Yeah, that's absolutely is. And one other quick comment on working from home. For many years, I managed a team back when I was actually working of people who two were in Argentina and one was in Ireland, and I'm in New Jersey. So we learned how to do work from home, and I can give you a tiny bit of insight. It's a different skill set. It's not the same thing. And what you're going to find also is that there are some people who don't do well at it because they chafe under the responsibility of the manager to say, okay, what'd you do? How are you doing? You as a manager, you have to come up with a way of saying, guys, you need to keep me informed. I can manage your results, but I can't manage them on the long term. So yeah, you may feel like I'm micromanaging you to a degree, maybe more than I did in the past. But as a manager, I've got managers, and I need to let them know what all these people are doing working from home. I did work from home for 10 plus years. I can tell you it's a different skill set. I can tell you that what people need to understand is no one expects that they're going to be sitting at that desk 8 hours working from home. It's a different environment. Unless you can physically segregate yourself somewhere in your house, which is generally not the case, it's a balance. So if you have to take off 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, that's expected. That's fine. That's understandable. You're not going to go out to the store necessarily right now with all the other restrictions, but it's a balance. So that's the only other thing I would say in trying to manage to your, and I like your approach, Brianna, as far as the 20%. It's a challenge for us. We have 3 people that work on site. So 20%, 50%, and 100% come out to about the same thing. The problem we have is they all work in a very physically close office. So we may have to go with your other approach of saying, hey, maybe you come in Tuesday, Thursdays, and these other two come in Monday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because they work more closely together, just to balance it. And we have to reach out privately and get a feeling for how do the individuals feel, as you said, because some of them have already indicated that, hey, I'm very nervous. Right now, we have our community manager coming in twice a week at her request. She said, she's a community manager on site. She said, I can't do this all from home. I can't drag all those file cabinets back home with me. And I've got lots and lots of it electronically, but there are things I need. So we're working with her. We're not going in, no residents in the building. So it's a complex set of interacting things that you have to worry about. And we're just trying to stay on top of the governor, as I said, on a daily basis, just to see, okay, where do we go, and how do we make sure that we're following through on, because we just Wednesday announced a reminder to everybody the clubhouse is closed. That means all the outside amenities are closed also. So the fact that it's going to be nice weather and we have brand new bocce courts and whatever, no bocce, please do everybody a favor. Because you can't, if you play two people playing bocce, yeah, you're going to be 6 feet apart. But if you got two teams playing, you're not 6 feet apart. So it's like, you know what, everybody just, we'll get there. And as soon as we can, we will, but no, we can't. So sorry for a protracted answer there.
And I think the 6 feet apart, you are maintaining it that way, but you're still touching a similar surface.
That's correct.
Walls,
That's
right?
correct.
Which I think kind of flows directly into the next topic if we don't have any other questions or comments.
Hi, I'm Roz Trotsky. I'm chairperson of the Homeowners Leader Group, and I'm a trustee in my community, Concordia, in Monroe Township, New Jersey. We send daily updates to our residents, what's happening, smiley things, YouTubes. We just put our newspaper, our monthly newspaper, on our website, so because it's not being printed on paper, so it went out to all our homeowners and they could read what's happening in the community. We all write articles for the newspaper. Our concierge is working from home. We have 1,757 homes. We have about 3,000 residents. She's working from home. She's calling all our residents. How are you? Do you need anything? Or how are you doing? And she's updating our telephone book at the same time. Also, she's soliciting cell phone numbers and new phone numbers for our robocalls, which we do to keep the community informed. We still have maintenance on site. We have one worker in our clubhouse alternating with another one. We have 24-hour nursing service. So we have to have somebody there cleaning up all the time. Some of our contractors have COVID, so they're not working on site. So we have another contractor who's doing siding, things that have to be done. We're doing all right. The community is helping each other out, and so we're good. And
that's what we like to hear, Roz, that everybody's helping each other out. And I think if you take anything away from both Roz and John speaking, it's that the more communication, the better. And they're communicating with their people. And so you need to be sending effective messages to them so that they can translate it to their communities.
our board meets once a week with our management team to plan, and this is all virtual. We do it on Zoom, and we meet and plan. We keep planning. So hopefully we will be out of this soon. But thank you.
Good. Well, how are we going to get at it? Oh, go ahead, Gabi.
Hey, hi Ryan, hi Bree. Quick question. So I know you said that you had some of your employees that really liked working from home and, you know, they actually exceeded. So after this is over, how is that policy going to be? Like, are you going to be more lenient in allowing them to continue to work from home, especially if they don't feel comfortable coming into the office? You know, I think a lot of people are kind of getting used to working from home. So how would you handle that situation?
Well, I can say as a company, we have been a little bit stingy on allowing people to work from home, just because as an MEP firm, if you have an M and E and a P sitting next to each other, logistically things just typically work better. That being said, this has changed the way we communicate with each other and just forced us into a situation where we just had to be better. We had to be more proactive with talking to each other. We had to be more virtually connected. So I think we as a company will definitely be more lenient moving forward with those who excelled. The issue remains those that think they excelled that did not. And that's going to involve a lot of coaching and training and teaching them, setting the expectations on what we need from them to go from a red to a yellow to a green.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I think for a lot of us, this is going to dramatically change the work from home policies that we allow as companies.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So, Gabi, I can elaborate on that a little bit too. So for us, we have in our Homedale location, we have about 90 or so employees in that square footage that we have there. So we kind of outgrew the square footage that we leased, and we were going to have the problem anyway, where we were going to have to do like a work from home policy where we could grow without having to take up more square footage in the building. So we were already kind of thinking that way. And, you know, there are people that definitely excel in the work from home setting for us. I personally would rather be in the office, but that's just me. It's going to work out well for us. We're going to be able to see who can do well from home and who can do better in the office. I think that keeping track of their productivity is my main struggle right now, really seeing what's being done when, and John touched on that earlier, and really measuring and monitoring what the work product actually is. So that's where we're really going to put put our heads together and figure that out. I think what we're measuring right now, it seems that there's a lot of work getting done, but it's going to be a trailing factor. Are our clients being served exactly the way that they were before? Are they being served better? You know, how do we measure that? So that's really how we're approaching it.
Thanks, guys.
Gabi, not just that, but in addition, we're going to have to, it's not the staff. For me personally, the millennials tend to work very well from home because they grew up in this very virtual society. It's getting the leaders and the managers to catch up with how to figure out that productivity and efficiency. Are things going as well? So it's a learning process for a lot of us.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so I want to move on to the next topic because we are starting to run low on time, and just talk about safety for a second. And I won't go too into detail on this, but I think safety is something we can all agree on. There's a few things, right? Everyone needs some office economy size hand sanitizer, and masks are the new normal. But who is supplying the masks? We talked about communication, and maybe you've already gone to Vistaprint and put in an order for some branded PPE to say your company's logo across the front, and you're going to be distributing to all employees. But if your expectation is that when we return to the office, that your individuals will be wearing masks, it's important that you let them know that for two reasons. One, if you're going to supply them, how are you going to supply them? Is someone going to go in and leave one on each person's desk, right? With the expectation that they'll go in and pick them up. And if not, and if you don't have the capability to source masks for all of your employees, that's fine too. But you should tell them that the expectation will be that they use them at all times, and that they need to supply them themselves so that your staff can get on YouTube and start sewing, right? So there are a lot of, those are the big changes, the constant washing, the masks, we all know about that. But there's a lot of little things about our physical safety that we have never had to think about before. One change I'm making in my office is that there are 3 doors, 2 of which have codes. And only one of them is going to remain operational when we return. Why? Because 2 of the doors have codes on them. That's multiple touch points. That's someone going like this a few times and then entering the door. Not to mention those 2 doors also lead directly from the bathrooms. And I don't want to get into detail on how gross people can be just in general. But unless I'm going to physically stand there and sing happy birthday or count the 20 seconds every time someone washes their hands, I think it's better just to have everyone migrate to 1 door. Now you might have come to my office before and said, Brianna, those doors have handles on them, and what's your plan? Well, not anymore. Well, they'll still have handles, but you won't have to touch them for it to be open. Little things like buying a wedge to prop your doors open, if you can, will save from extra touch points. Let me tell you, wedges were on back order. So if this is something you're thinking about, you should probably put in your order now. Things like cleaning materials, soap, sanitizer, they've been on back order for weeks. So while we do have amazing cleaning services out there, they're not stopping by your office midday at lunch unless you have the budget for them to do so. So you need to start ordering those things now so that they can be ready in your office for when you do return, because it might take 3 weeks. It might take 6 weeks for them to come in stock. Additionally, we've all learned about the importance of air supply in your building and bringing in enough fresh air. And there's a lot of information floating around about air requirements, UV filtration. And I'm not going to go too much into detail on this because you really need to work with your building's landlord and your maintenance team or a great engineer to determine the right fit for your particular HVAC system, because not all are energy efficient, not all are necessary. And the last thing any of us want right now is to be spending money unnecessarily. But I would make the recommendation to you to request from your landlord to change your standard filter to a HEPA filter. A HEPA filter is not a brand. It's a standard of certification for filters that are able to diffuse or trap about 99.7% of particulates. Now, that doesn't mean that if I'm standing here and you're standing here and you sneeze, it's going to suck it in. What it does mean is that the general air that's circulating around your building will just be a little bit cleaner and healthier. In addition, for those who haven't been in the office in a while, it's likely that your landlord did not run the air full time while you were out. On a side note, you might want to consider asking for a rent reduction if you can, but that's up to you personally with your landlord situation. But you should make it clear to your building or landlord that you expect for them to run the air a minimum of 1 day prior so that you have fresh air circulating around your building before your staff's arrival. And we could talk about safety forever and the things that we should or could or wish we could afford to do in the future climate. But the last point I want to make about safety, and it's something that I don't think people are talking about enough, is also the secondary aspect of this pandemic. It's not just a physical pandemic, it's a mental one. And people are fearing for their safety physically and mentally. A lot of us have been cooped up for a really long time, and that does things to a person. You know, I was recently faced with a situation with a property manager, and let me clarify, this was not a New Jersey or not even someone on this coast, and not someone with a company within our CAI family. But the client was putting immense amounts of pressure on my firm to do a site visit, despite the executive orders and the laws saying we couldn't be on the roads. And I informed the individual that while typically as an engineer, we would complete the site visit in the initial point of the design, because it's against the executive order, our plan was to complete about 70% of the design, then go on site when we could and still meet the building department's requirements for submission. So the timeline wouldn't change. But the client repeatedly pressured one of my engineers to come on site, and going as far to say, just lie and say you live here. And this is a really smart individual that works on my team. And he was so nervous about declining the work or telling me about the situation because of all the furloughs and the layoffs that are happening in the world to everyone. And so what I needed to do was protect his mental safety and stand up to this client. And, you know, they made a comment saying, if I had gone with this competitor of yours, they would have lied and gotten on site, and I had to decline the job. Because that's what we need to do. We need to protect our employees' safety, both mentally and physically. And in this really, really difficult time, it's more important than ever to recognize, for me at least, that that minimal $3,000 job was not worth the stress and the mental anxiety it was putting on my highly capable engineer. So I just want to kind of round that out by saying, you know, there's the physical aspect to safety and the mental aspect to safety. And is this something that everybody has thought about? Or anybody has thought about?
I will say that a lot of our commercial clients have already started implementing health screening, both for visitors and contractors and employees coming in the building. And it's really three different ways. One is just a health questionnaire where security is asking them, have you had a temperature? Have you been in contact with anybody with COVID? The second one is where the security is taking temperatures with a no-touch thermometer, which requires security to wear PPE. And some of them are going to the thermal cameras where you can scan someone's temperature from 6 feet away. Then the other problem that comes into that is when someone does have a temperature, how are you dealing with that? Take them to a separate room. Who's going to talk to them about why do you have a temperature? Is it going to be another security officer? Is it going to be somebody from HR? Is it going to be a health clinician? So those are some other things to think about when we reopen. You know, how are you going to screen, you know, the health of employees and visitors?
Yeah.
So there's actually a company out there that I thought was doing something pretty cool, and they supply these little kiosks. And we talked about this in another meeting, I think. And I think some people that are on this meeting have heard me say this before. We're still looking into it, but there's these little kiosks that they place at the entrance where the employee can run themselves through a little digital questionnaire and take temperature and log that they are symptom free before they actually enter the workspace. I thought it was really cool. I think that kind of stuff is going to be necessary just to keep employers out of harm's way. You know, Deb Rizzi she said maybe you should talk about EPLI insurance, but that'll take us years to talk about. So we'll make that another topic. But yeah, I think we have to do everything we can to try to ensure that our workplace is safe. That little kiosk was really a good idea, Dan.
Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I'm just going to funnel through with the last kind of general topic, which is policy adaptation. We've talked a lot about working from home and the policy changes we recommend, or I recommend, that you may make to your staff moving forward. And there's two ways you can think about this. One is the interim needs of your business, and one is the long-term changes or the long-term needs of your business. So one thing that I specifically highly recommend is having someone designated to review your policies and figure out what may need to change immediately. I know for me, I have a recruiting team. So the recruiting team isn't doing much recruiting right now. So I've asked them to be the pain points to source this information. Looking at your handbook, there are so many things that I recognize that are not in my handbook, that are just general rules or things that people just know you're supposed to do, right? So focusing on the immediate future, what kind of policies should we be thinking about? Well, for example, my company requires individuals who are traveling for over 100 miles to get a rental car. But I can't imagine stepping foot in a rental car. People are anxious enough when they're going on site. We're revising that policy immediately to allow individuals to take their own personal vehicle. We also have certain criteria regarding air travel if something goes over a certain number of miles. But with the airline industry and in influx, that's something we're obviously changing as well. So those are some kind of formal policies. In regards to site visits, luckily my firm does a lot of work with supermarkets, so we do have a letter from Homeland Security deeming us an essential business. So one of the protocols I had to enact is when someone's going on site, they have to follow certain steps, but as an additive, they also have to contact our office admin who can supply them with that letter. right? And the second point to that, in regards to site visits that we had to adapt to, is whose responsibility is it to verify the rules of the state and local authorities that they're going to be traveling to go on site. We added to our policy the project manager's responsibility to verify with local jurisdictions that the individuals will be able to do things like cross state lines or get into certain counties. I know I follow the New Jersey mandates very strongly, but I don't follow Pennsylvania and New York as strongly. So just making sure we know that information and incorporating that into your policies and procedures and daily functions. Conversely, from site visits and leaving the office, what about things like staying in the office? How are we going to handle areas of meeting or areas that promote congregation? During the pandemic, we've had mandatory staff meetings that are on Zoom. And I can tell you, as people start to reintegrate back to the office, it's an easier logistical way to manage it for all of us to still maintain on Zoom. Whether you're sitting at your desk or you're sitting at home, our office meetings will still now be on Zoom. And don't just think about the formal policies. We have a lot of gamers in our office. We have a lot of 20-something males, which means we have a lot of people that play video games. And a lot of the gentlemen like to go into the break, to sit at their desks and play games during their lunch hour. And that was a problem. So a few years ago, we decided to enact a policy that everyone had to go into the kitchen to play at lunch. Sounds a little silly, right? But a lot of engineers, a lot of gamers. What are we doing about the kitchen? How are we going to have people eating lunch? Do we need to set mandated times for people to, this person eats from 12 to 12:30, and then someone's responsibility to wipe down things like the tables in the common areas, right? So taking a review of your policies and your written and unwritten policies is going to be really important so that you can advise your staff on a safe way to go back into the office. Does anyone have any policies that they're concerned about?
Only thing I'll add to that is a lot of ours, we're doing a lot of the social distancing, how many people can be in an elevator same time? How many people can be in the lunchroom same time? And the one thing that kind of came at the end that we forgot about was you got to create signs beforehand to have posted signs of what the social distancing is in a conference room, in the lunch break area, in a break area, or things like that. So creating those signs have to be done beforehand before they return to work.
Absolutely.
That's something that I didn't think was, didn't really put that on the to-do list. You guys are giving me a lot of things that we got to put on the to-do list. So signage is big, and yeah, it's not like they're readily available. So how do we make that happen?
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we have any other questions?
All right. Well, I think, Brian, I think the overarching theme here is we as business partners need to communicate what we're doing. Not only should we have a plan in place for all aspects, whether it's bringing people back into the office or conducting ourselves in the businesses that we're in, we also need to have a plan as to how we're going to get that information out to our clients. John, board member, I'm not sure he's still on. Oh yeah, there he is. John, you're still on. What he said spoke to me the most, I think, today, which was, what are you guys doing? What are you doing before you come on site? And how do I know that I'm protected from your staff? And that really resonated for me. I'm sure it resonated for everybody else. We not only have to have our own plans, we have to make sure they know what they are. So that's my takeaway.
I mean, there's, if I could just add, there's some precautions that are taken, I guess, when you have guests, residents, or visitors. I know that certain attorneys have recommended one policy, whereas others have another one. One thing that our building is doing is, again, we are enforcing some rules on the restriction of non-residents, but even for contractors, that are there for emergency repairs, we do have a questionnaire for them, kind of as like our own screening process. And it'll ask like, have you been items such as like, have you been exposed, and things of that nature. So again, everything that's going on right now in a way is like a case study. Like, nobody saw this pandemic happening. It's going to be a case study for workspaces, just your day-to-day, or even like standard operating procedures for pandemics. So it's a matter of like trial and error, but at least there's little tools that we can implement, such as questionnaires of this nature.
And also, I want to add, I've heard from a lot of property managers that their vendors they're communicating there very well. They're saying, they're texting them beforehand and with a picture of them. They're saying, just want to let you know, we'll be coming into the community. We've protected ourselves, and giving them information, giving them a picture of them so they know what the person looks like. So there is that communication, and I think that's putting a lot of the community, the managers, at ease, so they don't even need to ask the question. So that's just one thought of what the vendors can do to help the communities.
All right, well, thanks everyone, and thanks for at least giving me a reason to put on some earrings. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brianna. I just want to add, before everyone leaves, I will be sending out a contact list. So if anyone wants to communicate with anyone else that was on the call, thank you. And please feel free to network. I'll also be sending out Brianna's contact information in case anyone has any further questions for her. And also a survey. So if you could please complete the survey. In the survey, if you have any ideas of what you like the next Virtually Connected to be on, please share that.
Sounds like a plan. So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend if we don't talk to you otherwise. And
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Excellent. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you both.